We're back. You're back. We're all back on another episode of Syracuse Sports. Great to have you here, my friends. Hope you're subscribed. If you would do so on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, it would just make your life easier because that means when a new episode of Syracuse Sports pops up, you won't miss a thing. And you can listen on demand when you want. We got a jam-packed show lined up today. My guy, Javon Edmonds, is back. We're going to do two things when it comes to Syracuse football. One, we are going to look at the Syracuse football players drafted and those that signed undrafted free agent signings who will have an instant impact in the National Football League. 4 guys drafted, 8 guys as we speak that have signed contracts. Who sticks in the league? Who makes an instant impact? Who is going to make it in the National Football League? Javon and I will discuss that. Plus, the transfer portal may be closed technically, but the portal never sleeps, my friends. As long as you got your name in by Friday, the transactions, the signings, the visits, the speculation will continue. So who's in, who's out from Syracuse football, the potential signings on the table as well, and Fran Brown and company continuing to try to make this roster better. We will look at the portal as it stands, the Syracuse roster as it stands, and with a little help from you, we are going to do that, our Syracuse Sports Insiders, who had some terrific questions for Javon and I on the state of the roster, what Syracuse is doing in the portal, and Syracuse football kind of going forward here. So we will answer some of those. And being a Syracuse Sports Insider, first of all, gives you exclusive access to this pod. We only answer questions and comments from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. We don't take questions from Twitter or Blue Sky or Threads or Instagram or is MySpace still around? No matter what it is, we don't feed those questions here. We only take questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders because being a Syracuse Sports Insider gives you direct access to this pod and it gives you direct text message access to me anytime. That's right. You can text me anytime. Your questions, your comments, your thoughts, just want to shoot the breeze. Talk SU Sports. That's what the Syracuse Sports Insider text line is there for. It's our growing community of some of the more passionate Syracuse sports fans out there. Stay informed. Talk SU Sports with us anytime to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. It's just $3.99 a month. The information is right there on your screen or in the show notes. How to sign up. It's just $3.99 a month as mentioned, but you can try it free for 2 weeks. So come on board. Jump in. The water's warm. Always a great time to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. So Javon and I are going to cover those 2 topics coming up here. But just a reminder, we love to feature your original music here on Syracuse Sports. Get in touch. All the info is in the show notes on how you can send me your original music, or if you know of a great artist, friend of yours in a band, hey, they got some good stuff, Brent, you should check it out. We love to feature your original music here on the show, and we're doing it again today. And I always love when we feature an artist and then they get back in touch and they say, hey, I got some new stuff out. Love it. Craig Marshall is back. Craig has been featured a couple of times here on Syracuse Sports. I love his stuff. You'll love his stuff too. So all the information on how you can listen to Craig is in the show notes. So check out his stuff. He's got a new single out from a new, I like it when we still refer to it as an EP, right? A record, right? I'm old school like that. A new record is out, and the lead track off that is called Nothing But the Truth. So we're going to take a little bit of a listen to that now, and then we'll play the song in its entirety at the end of the podcast, which, by the way, we can do for you too. Get in touch if you want your original music featured here on Syracuse Sports. Let's listen to a little bit of that, and then Javon and I dive in on those Syracuse football issues.
What's worth knowing? How to begin? We can start walking. Make me a deal. When we start talking, it's got to be real.
All right, Javon, we got a couple of big football things to discuss here. The portal never sleeps, although the portal is officially closed. So if you wanted to transfer, you had to have your name in by Friday. We're going to take a look at the comings and goings and potentials out of the portal for Syracuse football. But of course, the 2025 NFL draft is in the books. And if you were looking at it from a Syracuse perspective, people were getting pretty nervous over the weekend, Javon, because took until Arondé Gadsden went in the 5th round to the Los Angeles Chargers. Kyle McCord didn't go until the 6th round to the Eagles. And then you had LaQuinn Allen and Fidel Diggs go in the 7th round. So ultimately, I thought Syracuse would get 4 picked. They did get 4 picked, but we were kind of waiting around until the latter part of day 3 for all those things to go through. So now that we've seen the 4 guys drafted, and there's been some undrafted free agent signings as well, a total of 12 guys are going to be in camps for Syracuse upcoming here. Of the draft picks that Syracuse got, let me toss this out to you. Who do you think has the best chance to make an immediate impact in the National Football League?
I think 2 of them actually have a good chance to make a name for themselves this season. Storylines to watch. So I'm a Ravens fan. This guy isn't too particularly liked back home at the moment, but he's the offensive coordinator for the Chargers now, Greg Roman. Dude loves tight ends. Vernon Davis and Mark Andrews had tremendous success under him in San Francisco and Baltimore, respectively. That is a great landing spot for Arondé Gadsden. Lant McConkey's the only receiver they have. Justin Herbert is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the National Football League. Roman loves tight ends. He's competing against Will Dissly and Tyler Conklin for snaps. Both had about 400 yards last season. Arondé Gadsden can find himself in the rotation pretty soon. He could be tight end 1 by the end of his rookie deal, to be honest with you. So I think he landed in a perfect spot. And then LaQuinn Allen Jr. Travis Etienne has not lived up to his hype. I think it only took 2 or 3 years for me to get off of his bandwagon, to be honest with you. He has slowed down tremendously the last 2 seasons.
Yes, yeah.
So with Jacksonville getting Tank Bigsby, I want to say last year, 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, and last year was when they really started giving them snaps. And Etienne's deal is going to be coming up soon. Like, if LaQuinn Allen does his thing in practice and training camp and during the third down opportunities he possibly earns this season, Etienne, the Jaguars might have every reason to let Etienne walk out the door and move forward with Tank Bigsby is their, workhorse back, and LaQuinn Allen is their change of pace and third down, pass catching guy. So I think those are the 2 that landed in some pretty decent spots.
No
we'll
question
see what
about
happens with Fidel Diggs. Kyle McCord's a conversation I'm sure we're going to have separately.
Yeah.
So I'll save my thoughts on that.
We will get to that here shortly. But I agree with your 2 picks. LaQuinn, I think, is in a beautiful spot. Not too long ago, Javon, I can remember as a Buffalo Bills fan really wanting the Bills to take Etienne. I just loved what he did at Clemson. Thought he fit the Bills perfectly. Didn't go there, and now he's already maybe flaming out of the league. That's how quickly these things can happen. The Jaguars did take another running back. They took Bashal Tootin in the 4th round. But look, LaQuinn Allen is the only other guy, along with Cam Scatterbo, who, by the way, I thought was a terrific pick for the New York Giants, to have 1,000 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving. It just feels like he can help that team right away. The value of catching the ball out of the backfield is just going to be tremendous for LaQuinn Allen. So great spot for him. It's always good news when somebody moves up for you. And the Chargers moved up for OG. You mentioned how Roman and Harbaugh love to use the tight end position. And Javon, I know people like the videos of when the draft picks get the phone calls, right? You see the emotion. You had a great story over the weekend that people should check out on syracuse.com about Kyle McCord. And it's always an emotional moment. But frankly, a lot of those things are pretty boring, right? It's a GM and he talks to the guy and he's like, where are you at? Are you excited? Like, you hear the same things. You did not hear that with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is on the phone with OG, and Jim Harbaugh is always fired up. I get it. But he was fired up, and he said, we've got a spot for you here. Like, right on the phone, just says to him, we got a spot for you here. We moved up for you. We're excited for you. Like, you could genuinely tell how excited he was, and I believe it was the GM who was on the phone with him as well. So all good news for OG, and he just fits what they do there. All right, now let's get to the other 2 guys. I'm happy for Kyle McCord that he's back home, that he's with the Eagles, that storyline is fantastic, right? but does Kyle McCord have a legitimate chance to compete for the backup spot for the Philadelphia Eagles? Jalen Hurts, I think they're good at quarterback there. Tanner McKee, right? Like, you're not in that conversation. Tanner McKee is pretty locked in as number 2. I talked to a bunch of Eagles fans over the weekend that I know, and just everything you read and hear, it's going to be difficult for Kyle McCord to slip into that role. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is what he's got his eyes on. This is going to be a battle for QB3, right? I think there's other spots he could have gone, namely the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is always interesting, Javon, because Will Howard and Kyle McCord will be linked forever. There are spots he could have gone where he could have competed to play beyond the field and maybe not start day one, but have a shot to get there. So I get what the Eagles are doing. They have one of the smartest general managers in football, and I like the storyline. But in terms of getting on the field anytime soon, that's not a good landing spot for him. So in a way, I kind of feel bad for McCord that he's not going to get fair run to play with the Eagles.
I had thought about sending this to you in teams when it happened. I said, I'll just wait for the pod. In a way, like, you know, okay, this is the team that drafted him and gave him his NFL career. But, like, in a way, the Eagles kind of screwed Kyle McCord over. Like, this was a guy who, to me, had no business being drafted after Dylan Gabriel, no business being drafted after Jalen Milroe, no business being drafted that close to Will Howard. This could have been a day 3 guy who competed for a starting job somewhere. And Pittsburgh was right there. Like, I think if he's still on the clock, Pittsburgh chooses McCord over Will Howard. Actually, I can't say that because the Steelers, offensively, their decision-making has been awful. No Shedeur Sanders at 21. The way this quarterback class worked out, like, everyone's on Twitter all riled up and mad at Mel Kiper saying he threw a hissy fit on ESPN, boom, boom, boom. I'm not a big Mel Kiper fan. This weekend was Mel Kiper's best work. He hit the nail on the head. The NFL has been clueless with this quarterback evaluation for 50 years. They're just guessing. And you know they're just guessing because you've got terrible GMs, terrible former GMs on these TV networks like Mike Tannenbaum that tell you they have no clue what they're doing. So, like, this class was awful as far as how they fell in the draft. The evaluation of the class, I mean, was just awful. And you just feel bad for McCord because you've got to wonder, like, man, Pittsburgh was a spot for him.
Yeah.
You know, and Philly moved up a few picks before the Steelers and grabbed him for him to be competing for QB3. Like, you're happy Kyle went home, but that stinks. And then on top of that, one last thing I want to address before we move off this draft topic. There are so many nameless and faceless cowards in the world today. The fact that Kyle McCord, Tyler Warren, and Shedeur Sanders had to deal with prank calls.
Oh, God.
On what was supposed to be the happiest weekend of those 3 young men's lives. Absolutely. And there were probably more that I just haven't read up on yet. I know about those 3.
There's definitely more. There was a couple picks for the Bills. One of their offensive linemen from UConn got pranked 5 times in one day.
That is spineless. That is just disgusting. And Kyle's case was even worse because he kept getting calls from Jersey and Philly area codes. And these are phone numbers that these guys got from the NFL.
Right. These are secure lines. At least in theory, they were supposed to be, right?
These are supposed to be secure lines that got leaked. Jeff Ulbrich, the DC of the Falcons, his son logged onto his laptop and got Shedeur's number and prank called him. The relationship between Deion Sanders and the Falcons tells you everything you need to know about why that'll never be a winning organization. That is arguably the best football player to ever touch the gridiron, made the Falcons who they are. And for that to happen from them to his son is ridiculous. For that to happen to Kyle McCord from people in his home area is ridiculous. For that to happen to Tyler Warren, who already got screwed over by not being the first tight end selected. I don't know what the Bears were thinking. For those 3 young men, heart goes out to them because that is just, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. That's just cruel.
You got to be a special kind of putz to go out of your way to find a phone number of somebody and do that. And that's just jealousy. That's just pettiness. It's just a number of things. And Javon, I love sports. I'll always love sports. But unfortunately, sports can bring out the best and the worst of people. All right. On that note, so we mentioned Fidel Diggs a little bit. Look, when you're a 7th-round pick, it's an uphill battle to make a roster. He is going to be a situational pass rusher as it is. So I'll be curious to see where he fits in camp, what his role is in camp. I think he was going to be a situational guy no matter where he went. But at the end of the day, Javon, there is a need for pass rushers. And then I talked to Jordan Reed from ESPN on this pod a little while ago. He had Fidel going a lot earlier. He had him going in the 4th round. He's got 4.5 speed. You need that one thing that people can latch onto and say, this is what you do. And that's what Fidel does. So I think in that opportunity, he'll have a chance to stand out there. But again, 7th-round pick. LeQuint's different story. LeQuint was a 7th-round pick, but you look at the versatility he brings to the Jaguars. You mentioned the situation with ETN. He's got a really good chance to not only make that roster, but make an impact. I'll be interested with Fidel in the situation in New Orleans, which, frankly, hasn't been the best run organization over the past few years.
So versatility is the perfect word. And
Yeah.
The Saints are the perfect team for this reason. Same way quarterback has become the overhyped, overemphasized piece of the offense, the edge rusher has become that on defense. And the Saints happen to be the home of Cam Jordan, who works for NFL Network every offseason, since the Saints aren't, competing for anything anytime soon. He was on not too long ago. I think he was on Julian Edelman's podcast or something. And he goes, there's a difference between a defensive end and an edge rusher. And these guys aren't understanding that being an edge rusher is limiting them.
Yeah.
When you're a defensive end, you are the full package. You can rush the passer. You have outside contain on the run. You can swim inside to stop the run. You are a complete player. These edge rushers are specialists. They're limiting themselves. There aren't many true defensive ends. So for Fidel Diggs, adding that versatility to his game is going to be key because he is just a get to the outside shoulder edge rusher at the moment. I encourage him to latch on to Cam Jordan, who does not have many days remaining in his NFL career. Latch on to him and let him help you become a complete defensive end. You should not want the tag edge rusher. Become a complete defensive end. Stick to Cam this summer. That is how you earn your spot on the Saints roster and build an NFL career for yourself to at least play long enough to get yourself a pension.
And maybe be willing to switch to linebacker. There were times Diggs had to step back at linebacker for Syracuse, and if they determine that you're just not, as you said, the complete pass rusher, can they convert you? Versatility is your friend. You know what else is your friend? When you're a late-round pick or an undrafted free agent, we're going to go through those names here shortly. Special teams.
Special teams.
If you can play on special teams in any capacity, it is only going to help your cause to make a roster. So, Javon, I don't want to go through all the undrafted free agents, and to Syracuse's credit, they had a bunch here. But I'll say the names, where they went, and then you tell me, and then I'll throw out a couple names I think could stick that you think, even as undrafted free agents, which, talk about an uphill battle to stick on an NFL roster. That's a tough gig. It can happen, but it's a tough gig. Justin Barron, Elijah Clark to the Dallas Cowboys, Jackson Meeks to the Detroit Lions, Savion Washington, Marlo Wax to the Los Angeles Chargers, joining OG out there. Tom Callahan got a tryout with the Las Vegas Raiders as a long snapper, and Max Mang getting a deal with the Indianapolis Colts. So good for Max in that realm. Of those names I just said, who could make a 53-man roster? Or, I'll throw it to practice squad too. Could stick on an NFL team.
I think you're looking at the two Cowboys guys, Clark and Barron, just because Jerry Jones has messed up their money over there, and their defense needs all the help it can get.
Mm-hmm.
And those two bring a versatility to where, a first-year staff can just figure out where they want to put those guys, So I think those two are the most likely, and I think right after them would be Jackson Meeks. After that, I find a hard time seeing any of the guys creating a significant role for themselves. Marlo Wax might stand a chance because the Chargers have a pretty good coaching staff over there running that defense. After that, it's hard for me to imagine many of them. I will say this. You mentioned special teams is the way to stick. It's how Max Main got a contract. That dude had like 9 catches in 5 years. He was Mr. Special Teams. Special players make special plays on the special teams. You keep that mindset to you, stick around for a long time. Matt Slater's going to have his jersey retired by the Patriots.
David Tyree, Syracuse guy, made his bones on special teams before he made that great catch in the Super Bowl.
To all you guys, keep that mindset. Special players make special plays on the special teams.
Put it on a bumper sticker. I agree with you on one guy with Dallas, and that's Clark. Clark is versatile. He can play corner. He can play safety. I'm surprised he wasn't drafted, frankly. The thing I worry about with Barron is they're trying to convert him to linebacker. And when you're making a conversion at the next level, that can be challenging. I'm not saying you can't do it. And again, special teams could be his friend there as well. I just think it's a little more difficult to stick when you're trying to make that transition. But look, Barron is a beast. He knows the game. He's a ball hawk. He's everything coaches love, so they're going to give him a shot. Meeks got a priority contract from the Lions. They guaranteed him $200,000 and a $20,000 signing bonus, which is a good sign in a way. It's just a deep passing game in Detroit that I have a hard time seeing Meeks work his way into, even at practice squad level. I will say this, Javon. There's something about Marlo Wax that coaches love, the leadership. I think his 40 time in his pro day showed he recovered well from his injury. He's a productive linebacker. There's just something coaches love about this guy. And he just stands out to me as somebody that Jim Harbaugh could take a look at as just a guy that we can keep around on a practice squad. I don't think he makes the 53-man. I'm not going to predict it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. But I definitely think Clark sticks with Dallas. Other than that, I think it's going to be a lot of uphill battles. I keep using that term, but that's what I see for a lot of those other guys.
So the reason I say Barron can stick in Dallas, they have Micah Parsons over there, and for some reason run a 4-3. When you've got a versatile guy like that who can drop back in coverage, like can play Mike linebacker and can rush the passer, you're sticking him as a 4-3 edge rusher, and he can't stop the run out there. Like, you have Micah Parsons, you're supposed to build your whole defense around being a 3-4, right? I'm not going to get into talking too much scheme. Get back to what they actually run, which is the 4-3. That's 3 linebacker spots. Got your Mike, your weak side, and your strong side. That's like 6 roster spots right there for Barron to compete for.
That's a good point.
Doesn't have to be impressed with some super smart mind being the Mike. Doesn't have to impress with some super speed being the strong side guy. If he can just be good enough to earn the backup spot at weak side, he's got the chance.
All right, Javon. Switching to the portal never sleeps. So technically the portal has closed. It closed on Friday. You had to have your name in the portal by then. But keep in mind, players can still visit anytime. Syracuse is hosting a number of players earlier in the week here as we record, as we speak. As long as you got your name in by Friday, the visits can come, the signings can still come, and there still will be portal activity throughout the next few weeks here, right? So let me get a quick reminder for everybody out there. Out the door, in no particular order: Cody Hornsby, David Wollabaugh, Willie Goodcare, Enrique Cruz from the offensive line, Murad Watson and Xavier Miles from the defensive line, Jaden Brown at linebacker, Trevor Pena, of course, at wide receiver, Michael Johnson Jr., A.J. Miller, and Patrick Grisser from the quarterback position. In the door for Syracuse, in no particular order: Steve Angeli, quarterback, Notre Dame, their most significant portal addition. offensive lineman Austin Collins from Louisville, Gary Bryant III from South Dakota at linebacker, and George Rooks, defensive tackle, Boston College, a Syracuse legacy, by the way. His father, a great player at Syracuse, the Big East Defensive Player of the Year in 1991. Okay. Those are the names. That's the in and out. Potentials. Okay. As we speak, Javon, these players have visited or shown interest in Syracuse in some way. Wide receiver Jonte Cook, Hakeem Williams, Cook from Washington and Texas, Williams from Florida State. Offensive line, a bunch of names. Orion Irving, Sam Houston State, Jaylene Matthews from Rutgers, TJ Ferguson, Florida State, Cam Pringle, South Carolina, Zach Rice, UNC. I would add Tyler Williams, a wide receiver from Minnesota, to that list, who I think is going to show some interest in Syracuse. And there's a lot of coaches and players from Syracuse showing interest there. Okay. All that said, let's look at the incoming. How has Syracuse improved itself with some of the names that we mentioned? We've talked about Angeli a lot, right? We can include him in this discussion if you want, but how has Syracuse improved at those positions with the names that we noted that we know are locked in?
Really, I can't say they've improved much. Linebacker got the improvement. Absolutely. Gary's from Baltimore, played closer to DC at Our Lady of Good Counsel. Supposed to talk to his coach early this week. That was the spot they needed an upgrade. And it was interesting because I spoke to Gary either Wednesday or Thursday night when he was at Hancock getting ready to fly out. And he's like, Fran told him they needed some experience in the linebackers room. And, you know, he's going to really lean on Gary to bring that leadership. And it's funny because the guys that we had as projected starters are redshirt seniors, and Gary Bryant's a redshirt junior. So for Fran to use experience with Gary and not those guys,
that's interesting.
There's a lot. That lets me know he's definitely got the inside track to be, you know, the green dot. Well, no, green dot's probably going to go to Deuce or Devin, but he's going to be the leader of that linebacker room. I think with Angeli, you gave yourself a safety net in case Trevor Pena's suspicions had some validation to them and, you know, Ricky Collins doesn't pan out to be the best thing since sliced bread. After that, you just replace depth pieces in Rollerball and Cruz with just one guy in Collins. So, like, you're going to need one of these other guys to commit over the weekend. We've got 3 of them in. If I had a crystal ball, you know, I'd probably predict Zach Rice commits before, you know, this week is over with. That's just guesstimating at this point. But yeah, you've got to get 2 or 3 of those guys to commit this weekend just to say you replaced your depth pieces.
I really like the George Rooks ad as well. If you're going to lose Murad Watson, who is potential all the way, freshman All-American, Fran Brown spoke pretty bluntly about the offer he got from Texas, and it's like, you go get your green, young man. We can't do that here, right? But
can we talk about that for like 2 seconds?
Of course we can. Yeah.
So, Fran and Syracuse had announced a partnership with Community Bank not long after I got up here. I think it was like it was very close to Pro Day in the start of spring.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think it was like 2 or 3 days before spring practice started. And I asked Fran, I'm like, how important are these types of partnerships going to be to keeping Syracuse from becoming a feeder program? Because that is how college football works right now. It's like,
it's a great question.
Georgia and Bama and all those schools, those are the major leagues. Then you've got other schools that are AAA, some that are AA, some that are high A, and some that are low A, right? And he's like, oh, I'm just not even going to be in that conversation. I don't know why you asked that question. Well, Fran, this is why. I know you're a super recruiter. You know, never downplay your ability to get talent in here. And your guys love you. And so far, you seem to be an outstanding coach. However, facts are facts, and you've got to face reality. You are at Syracuse, which for the past 40 years has been a basketball school in a basketball conference. You are very susceptible to losing your guys to the major leagues. Like, you got to be honest with yourself. The only reason you get Syracuse from AAA to the majors is being honest and admitting that Syracuse is still in AAA and working its way to the majors. You lost Trevor Pena because of money. You lost Murad Watson because of money. So you may not want to answer that at the time. But fast forward a month or two, it turns out to be a very valid and relevant question for this program. NIL and retaining talent is still something that Syracuse has to figure out.
There's no question about it. Watson, I think, is a better example of that than Pena. Because Watson is a guy who you were going to get freshman. 3 more years. True freshman, right? Emerges, freshman All-American, stands out, Texas swoops in and grabs him, right? Which Syracuse will do. Look, some of the names we're talking about here, Javon, Florida State, Texas, Rutgers, South Carolina, North Carolina, right? That's great that they're coming from programs like that, but what's wrong with them, I think, is the fair question. Why didn't it
that
work
means
out?
they're transferring down.
Exactly.
When you're mentioning Texas, Florida State, and Georgia.
Depending on how much your faith and PFF grades are, some of these offensive linemen have some eye-popping PFF grades that make you question certain things, right? So how much is Syracuse upgrading? Okay. Jonte Cook is a great example of this. He is an all-world talent. He is a top 40 recruit, but he's got a couple of rests on his record. He was at Washington for 5 minutes before they kindly showed him the door, left Texas. Everyone deserves a second chance. Do they deserve a third chance in this case? You're taking a risk there, right? If he was on that level with a Washington or a Texas, which again is weird to talk about them being, I have to correct myself. Washington, Big Ten, Texas, SEC, right? It's still just, yeah, exactly. That's my reaction every time. But it did not work out there for him. So that's what you're still taking in. That's still a problem for Syracuse. I get what Fran was saying about Trevor Pena and not wanting to pay him what he wanted to pay him. Murad Watson, the same thing. But that is still a major disadvantage for Syracuse. It can't discourage you from bringing in talent like that and recruiting your butt off and bringing in those type of players. But that is the risk you take. That if you find a diamond in the rough or a highly touted player, no matter what they're rated as, and they get a little shine out there, here's going to come the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're going to throw an offer at these guys. A lot of these names that Syracuse simply can't match at this point. So Fran's on to something here, and I think people are encouraged by what they're seeing. And some of these names that are coming in, I think, are encouraging that Syracuse would not get in the past. But you're still a AAA-like franchise. You're still upgrading for the league above you. As the draft went, SEC, Big Ten, the ACC was third, by the way. I'll give them credit for that in terms of draft picks, but there's still a major gap between those two and where Syracuse is at this point. I think that's a great point to make. Of those names that I mentioned that Syracuse has potential to get, there's a lot of names in there, a lot of different positions, couple good receivers, offensive linemen, right? But I feel like it always comes back to the trenches, Javon. You got to make a couple of these offensive linemen work. We mentioned could be a flaw or two, PFF grades. There's a reason these guys are transferring from other places, but boy, that offensive line needs an upgrade, and only Austin Collins at this point, not going to work out. So of those guys, I would love to see either Angeli or Collins get another target or two. Cook's got a lot of speed. Williams burned Syracuse for a 45-yard touchdown a couple years ago for Florida State. I like what Tyler Williams brings, 6'3", 210, 4-star guy. But Syracuse has depth at wide receiver. It's not a priority position, right? You always look to upgrade. Offensive line is still a major issue for this team, who, by the way, Javon, as we speak, this team doesn't have a true center, which is why of the outgoing guys, I still am I don't want to say miffed. That'd be strong. I'm still concerned at losing David Wohlabaugh. Wohlabaugh would have played. Wohlabaugh's versatile. I'm not sure what his money situation is or anything beyond that. But that's the one that I'm still scratching my head at. Frankly, Hornsby, Willie Goodcare, Enrique Cruz, I could see why they left. David Wohlabaugh is the one that I still say they need a guy like that. So right now you've got a starting center who's never played center with a quarterback competition, right? That's a concern to me.
I don't think Petrie's penciled in. Well, I think he's penciled in and not pinned in at center now.
Exactly.
With Collins coming in.
Yeah.
Like, I think, Petrie may get erased and Collins' name may get written.
Great. Maybe that solves the problem.
Slides elsewhere.
It's still a new center with a new quarterback.
It is, though. It is.
That's a concern. Yeah.
That's what you have June through August to develop.
All right. Any other thoughts on the portal before we exit stage left here? And you know what? Why don't we turn to our Syracuse Sports Insiders because they can help answer some of those questions.
Yeah.
And what they had to say. Always good questions from you guys. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get direct text message access to me anytime to talk Syracuse sports, ask questions about Syracuse sports. We love hearing from you guys, and it's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. But try it free for 2 weeks. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. That's how you sign up. It's right there on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. Danny P leads us off, Javon. He says, do you think Syracuse is in a better or worse position in the offensive line than if the players that entered the portal had stayed? I don't know. I think
Wohlabaugh is the only big loss.
Yes.
And kind of got replaced already, right? They like Petrie enough, and then you bring in Collins just in case. I don't think they're missing too much of the guys they lost on the O-line. Like Enrique Cruz went from 13-game starter to appearing in 3 games. So clearly, like, he wasn't a Fran Brown guy, Fran Brown era guy. So I don't think the O-line is the position group to really be losing sleep over in this portal cycle.
I think a few of the guys they're bringing in, when you look at the measurables, pop out. What Zach Rice measures at, what TJ Ferguson measures at, what Matthews measures at. You can't teach size. You always like to bring that. Collins is around 300.
And they got the Georgia guy coming in too.
Right.
Another, somewhat troubled offseason guy. But, that's another one.
But at this point, Dan, to answer your question, I don't know if we've seen an upgrade. It just feels like you're just shifting around parts on the boat here, if you will. Matty G says, hey, Brent, seeing all these updates, I'm curious, how does this spring compare to a year ago? What differences do you feel? I feel like it feels bigger. It feels bigger in the names that you're chasing. It feels bigger in the schools they're coming from. It just feels like Syracuse is a player now. When you're hearing you're in a top 3 with Colorado, Syracuse, and Pittsburgh, you're hearing guys that Jonte Cook, again, I know why he is on the list, but a level of talent like that will consider Syracuse. We mentioned the money issues that Syracuse has. There's no question about that. But they went out, go 10-3. If I'm a wide receiver, I know I've got a legitimate quarterback, at least on the surface. I mean, both Angeli and Ricky Collins have to prove themselves. But to get a Ricky Collins to come in just feels bigger. Like last year was all potential, and it was a lot of connections that Fran had, and now they're building on results. So that makes any sense, Matt. It feels like Syracuse is a player. It feels bigger. It feels like they can wedge their way into some of these conversations with some of the big-time programs, as much as they're fighting being a AAA franchise in a way, and could say, yeah, come here too. And they'll listen. They've established relationships with the agents, the NIL agents, and that's a whole conversation about how that works. That at the very least, when you see the transfer portal transactions out there, the ones that we report and the national guys report, you see Syracuse's name popping up there a lot more than you did a year or two ago. Randy H. says, now that the portal has settled things a bit, where do you think the team has the greatest strengths and weaknesses at this point? What do you think on that one, Javon?
I think the strength is still the receiver core. like the quarterbacks. I just don't have a grade on the O-line because I just don't think they practice against much competition this spring, to be honest with you. Wasn't a bad unit last year. So, I'll give them a, just they not stall out. They just stay right where they are. But weakness, I got to be honest with you, it's just defense as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your edge rush? I didn't see anything from your interior guys during the spring game. Your linebackers, there's only one I've got faith in right now, and he's just transferring again from the FCS level. So, I've got to tether my confidence there. Your corners can be had and were had in the spring game. Your safeties, I would say, is a strong suit. But after that, there's work. To kind of go back to the last question a little bit, I think it's similar this portal cycle to last season in the sense of there's urgency. Like last season, when there's a new staff, you have an urgency to fill out your roster. Right now, with the key players that have left, there's once again an urgency to fill out the roster with guys that can come in and play immediately.
And remember, and we're still kind of waiting this out because Judge Wilkins has to make the decision in the House versus NCAA case, but 105 roster limit, how's that affecting who you're going after and why? And it's just that hasn't quite been settled yet. We think it's going to be 105. Syracuse is bringing in a very big recruiting class in the fall. The math on this is going to be very interesting to follow when all of that settles in which it hasn't at this point, but it appears that it's going to be soon. Rock and Ron, my guy, has this question. With the predictions out there as we speak, they have not signed at this point. Jonte Cook and Hakeem Williams. How do you think those two would or could work out? I like that they're pursuing these guys. I like Fran's philosophy of there's always competition in the room. I like that he looks at the wide receiver position. Yeah, we've got some depth there. We've got some talent there. But why not throw another name or two in the room just to up the competition, just to give my quarterbacks every option they have, right? And Cook in particular, he is the most likely Trevor Pena replacement. 6 feet, 185, speed, talent, just could put him all over the field. But I see him as the primary Pena replacement because there's nobody else on that roster that does what Trevor Pena does. So if you're set on having that type of receiver in your offense, he can do that. And I think Williams just has all the measurables, Javon. I mentioned that touchdown he had against Syracuse a couple of years ago. Now, he didn't. You look at his numbers at Florida State, they're not off the charts here. He's looking for somewhere to play. Is he just on a talented Florida State roster that he couldn't quite crack and he needs a place to show out like a Jackson Meeks did here at Syracuse? Or do you wonder why things didn't work out for him there? Florida State brings in a lot of speed at receiver, a lot of talent at receiver, and some guys there's only one football, right? But coming to Syracuse where you have an established wide receiver room, I'd be interested to see how those guys would mix it up. But Cook to me is intriguing. To put all the off-field stuff aside, his talent speaks for itself.
My issue is the off-the-field stuff to me.
You can't ignore it.
The story.
With you can't ignore it. No, not at all.
And Marcus Easley, it's are y'all going to see the field? Are you going to be able to keep yourself out of trouble? I think that's the thing with these guys. I think they all can play, but it comes down to, are you going to make Fran look bad for giving you a second and third chance? And Fran doesn't strike me as the guy who's too forgiving with, having a second and third chance wasted, So,
you know what it is? It's a good stress test on your whole Dart philosophy, right? This is the philosophy we have.
This is the accountable part of that.
Exactly. The accountable part of it. I'm going to give you a chance here, but don't make me look stupid. Don't make me look foolish for giving you that chance, right? Which we haven't had, to Fran's credit. Syracuse has not had a lot of discipline issues, a lot of off the field things. did not have it in the latter years of the Dino Babers era, short of, a couple things that pop up here. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go, because they're bringing in the best talent they can and looking at the best talent they can. And there's 2 or 3 guys that you look at the off-field stuff and you say, sure about that. Does that override all the distractions and everything else that could affect how he is at Syracuse?
Yeah.
Well, Javon, the portal never sleeps, my friend, but that is up to the minute evaluations there, and it'll be very interesting to see where all these Syracuse guys make their way into the National Football League. Thanks as always. Keep up the good work. We'll catch you again soon here. I'm sure there'll be other things that'll pop up here shortly that you and I will be getting together to talk about here, but always appreciate your time and your insight, my friend.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for hanging on another episode of Syracuse Sports. Thanks to Javon Edmonds for his passionate insight as always. Thanks to Craig Marshall for his great tunage. We'll play his song, Nothing But the Truth, in full here at the end of the pod to conclude. And please send us your original music to be featured here on Syracuse Sports. We love to do it. All the information is in the show notes on how. Thanks for being part of the show. And just a reminder to please subscribe, follow, be it Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you prefer to get your podcast, because being a subscriber means that when a new episode is up, you know it, and you can listen when you want on demand. We'll keep following all the comings and goings in the portal. Lacrosse, are they going to make the NCAA tournament? Huge game for Syracuse against Notre Dame in the ACC tournament on Friday. We'll keep you up to date on that, both here on the pod and the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. Make sure you sign up for that. Become a Syracuse Sports Insider today to get direct text message access to me anytime. It's like 3 a.m. It might take me a little bit to get back to you, but you can send me your questions, comments, opinions, and analysis on all Syracuse sports anytime. And again, only our Syracuse Sports Insiders get their voice heard on the pod. So thanks for all of that. Thanks for being a Syracuse Sports Insider. Thanks for subscribing to the pod and for checking out today's episode of Syracuse Sports. We'll talk to you next time, guys. Thanks for hanging, and taking us out once again is our friend Craig Marshall. Nothing but the truth.
Where are you going? Where have you been? What's worth knowing? How to begin? We can start walking. Make me a deal. When we start talking, it's got to be real.